let's be honest for a second. You have saved that video. You know the one. It is a montage of a girl waking up at 5 in the morning looking surprisingly fresh. She drinks a glass of green liquid that probably tastes like a lawnmower bag. She writes in a gratitude journal and wears a matching beige workout set that costs more than my weekly grocery budget. Watching her feels oddly satisfying. It scratches a specific itch in your brain. But why does watching someone else live a perfectly curated life make you feel like your current existence is just a messy, rough draft? We call this the that girl trend. It is the internet's favorite flavor of self-improvement right now. On the surface, it looks like healthy motivation. Who doesn't want to be hydrated and organized? But if we peel back the layers of aesthetic filters and lo-fi beats, we find something distinctively psychological lurking underneath. You are not actually addicted to the health benefits of waking up before the sun. You are addicted to the feeling of control that comes with the aesthetic of perfection. It is a visual pacifier for a chaotic world where everything else feels unmanageable. Psychologically speaking, this obsession taps into something called the ideal self-concept. We all have 3 versions of ourselves. There is the actual self, which is you right now, likely wearing sweatpants and procrastinating. Then there is the ought self, which is who you think you should be. And finally, the ideal self. That girl is the ultimate projection of the ideal self. The problem is that social media has packaged this ideal self into a very specific consumer product. We start believing that if we just buy the right planner or the right skincare, then our personality will fundamentally change. This brings us to the trap of aesthetic productivity. We often confuse the appearance of doing well with actually doing well. It is a form of performative functioning. You spend 3 hours researching the perfect gym routine and creating a mood board for your fitness journey. Your brain actually releases dopamine during this planning phase, just as if you had actually done the workout. You get the chemical reward without the physical effort. It feels productive, but it is really just procrastination wearing a very expensive trench coat. You are busy curating a life instead of living one. Let's talk about the perfectionism aspect because it is massive here. This trend is essentially perfectionism dressed up as self-care. True self-care is often ugly. It is setting boundaries or crying or going to therapy or taking a nap because you are exhausted. But the that girl trend demands that self-care be photogenic. If your mental breakdown isn't aesthetic, does it even count? This creates a rigid standard where you feel like a failure if your morning routine gets interrupted. It turns healthy habits into a high-stakes performance where the only audience is your own insecurity. There is a concept in psychology known as the halo effect. This is a cognitive bias, where we assume that because someone looks good, they must also be good in every other way. When we see these influencers with their clean rooms and glowing skin, our brains automatically assume they are also happy and wise and financially stable. We equate organized spaces with organized minds. But I promise you that you can have a color-coded bookshelf and still have a complete existential crisis. A clean room does not equal a clean psyche, but the algorithm convinces us it does. The danger here is something called the arrival fallacy. This is the belief that once you reach a certain destination or acquire a specific habit, you will finally be happy. You tell yourself that once you become that girl, you will no longer feel anxious or lonely. You are essentially waiting to start your life until you have optimized it. But happiness is not a destination you arrive at after drinking enough lemon water. By placing your happiness in a future hypothetical version of yourself, you are robbing your current self of any joy or grace. Let's look at the financial barrier that nobody likes to mention. The that girl aesthetic is undeniably classist. It implies that having your life together requires wealth. The organic produce and the supplements and the matching sets and the minimalist apartment with great natural lighting all cost money. When you cannot afford the aesthetic markers of this lifestyle, you internalize it as a personal failure. You think you lack discipline when in reality you just lack disposable income. We have monetized the concept of being a functional human being, and that is a really dangerous game to play. This obsession also encourages constant self-surveillance. You start viewing your life through a third-person lens. You are not just making coffee. You are watching yourself make coffee, imagining how it would look in a montage. This creates a disconnect called dissociation. where you become a spectator in your own life. You are performing your daily existence for an imaginary audience. It is hard to be present and mindful when you are constantly worried about the camera angles of your existence. You become the director of a movie that nobody is actually filming. We also need to address the toxic positivity woven into this trend. The that girl narrative rarely leaves room for bad days. It suggests that if you are sad, you just need to journal it away or go for a hot girl walk. While those things help, they are not cures for the complexities of the human emotional experience. By trying to edit out the negative emotions to fit the vibe, you are engaging in emotional suppression. And as any psychologist will tell you, suppressed emotions do not die. They just bury themselves alive and come back later in much uglier ways. Have you noticed how homogeneous this trend is? It reinforces a very specific and narrow standard of beauty and success. It usually excludes bodies that are not thin or spaces that are not modern. If your version of self-improvement does not look like the template, you feel like you are doing it wrong. This triggers social comparison theory on steroids. You are comparing your behind-the-scenes footage with everyone else's highlight reel. It is a recipe for inadequacy because you are chasing a composite image of a woman who does not actually exist in the real world. There is also the issue of burnout. When you try to overhaul your entire personality overnight to fit this mold, you are setting yourself up to crash. Sustainable change is usually slow and boring and invisible. It is not a sexy montage. The that girl trend promotes an all-or-nothing mentality. If you miss the gym one day, the illusion shatters and you feel like quitting entirely. This cycle of rigid adherence followed by inevitable collapse is actually worse for your self-esteem than just being average and consistent. So why does this trend persist? Because it gives us a sense of agency. In a world where the economy is scary and the future is uncertain, controlling what we eat and how we look feels like safety. We cling to routines because they act as anchors. The psychology here is about anxiety management. If I can control my morning routine, maybe I can control my destiny. It is a coping mechanism disguised as a lifestyle brand. We are just trying to organize our way out of existential dread. It is time to pivot to a healthier perspective. We need to move from aesthetic goals to functional goals. Ask yourself why you want to do these things. Do you want to wake up early because you love the quiet? Or because you think it makes you a better person? Intrinsic motivation comes from within, while extrinsic motivation comes from wanting to look a certain way. Extrinsic motivation burns out fast. You have to find the things that actually make you feel good, regardless of how they look on Instagram. Let's talk about the concept of the good enough self. Psychoanalysts have used the term good enough mother to describe parenting that is imperfect but adequate. We need to apply this to ourselves. You can be a good enough human. You can eat a salad and also eat pizza. You can have a productive morning and a lazy afternoon. Embracing the gray areas is where real mental health lives. You do not need to be a robot of efficiency to be worthy of love and respect. Real growth is usually messy. It involves failure and awkwardness and moments where you have no idea what you are doing. If your self-improvement journey looks perfect, you probably aren't learning anything deep. You are just performing. We need to romanticize the struggle a little bit. Not the struggle of poverty or hardship, but the struggle of trying and failing and trying again. That is the human experience. The that girl trend tries to sanitize the humanity out of being human. Don't let it. Here's a radical thought. Maybe you are not a project that needs to be fixed. Maybe you are just a person who is experiencing life. The constant drive to optimize everything treats your soul like software that needs an update. But you are not an operating system. You are allowed to have bugs and glitches. You are allowed to have days where you are unproductive and unaesthetic. Those days are not interruptions to your life. They are part of your life. Acceptance is a much stronger fuel than perfectionism. If you want to take the good parts of this trend, take the intention but leave the performance. Drink water because your body needs it, not for the aesthetic. Journal because your mind is cluttered, not because it looks cute. When you decouple the action from the image, you reclaim the power. You stop being a slave to the algorithm and start being a friend to your body. It becomes about how it feels, not how it looks. That is a subtle shift, but it changes everything. So instead of trying to become that girl, try to become yourself. I know that sounds like a cheesy greeting card, but it is true. Your version of a good life might look completely different from the trends. Maybe your optimal morning involves sleeping in and drinking instant coffee. If that works for you and you are happy and healthy, then that is the standard. We need to diversify our definition of success. Authentic joy is always going to be more attractive than curated perfection. Ultimately, the girl you are trying to become is already in there. She is just buried under piles of expectations and comparisons. You don't need to buy a new personality. You just need to be nicer to the one you have. So delete the mood board if it stresses you out. Close the tabs. Go do something messy and real. Being that girl is exhausting, but being you is sustainable. And honestly, you are way more interesting than a beige aesthetic anyway.